A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
Well, lots to talk about with a federal election announcement that's expected very soon. We like to keep up with the political agenda, and Michelle Pearse back with us, CEO of the Australian Christian Lobby. Hey, Michelle, welcome back.
Hi, Neil. Great to be here.
Michelle, the election, let's just say, is likely to be called sometime very soon. Lots of people predicting next weekend after the Reserve Bank meets. So far as elections go, just before we get into some of the policies and the issues that are going on, any thoughts from you around the election and how important this one is that's ahead?
Oh, this is so important. We've called it a hinge moment in our nation's history, and it really is. It will define the future of freedom in our nation. Things aren't on a good track at the moment. There's the threat of a Labor-Greens power-sharing arrangement. But on the other side, we see the coalition being more emboldened to speak against woke influence, particularly in the school system. So it's going to be very interesting to see, even if the coalition wins and they have to have a power-sharing arrangement with perhaps some Teals, how that would influence their ability to pass some reforms in the areas of protecting religious freedoms.
Let's talk, those sorts of things that happen. Power sharing arrangements. Maybe there's worst case scenarios and bad case scenarios. Power sharing arrangements with the Greens or with the Teals. Let's talk green policies here for a moment. That would seem to be the extreme likelihood of a power sharing arrangement if Labor has returned to power with a minority leadership there. What are your thoughts around how green policies might actually affect what Labor would be trying to bring into legislation?
Yeah, and you're right. It's the worst case scenario with a Greens power sharing arrangement, because then the Greens could ask Labor to do certain things that perhaps they wouldn't go so far on, but in order to secure power, they need to then agree to these requests of the Greens. And the Greens are the most anti-faith party. I mean, Australian Christian Lobby is non-party partisan. We want Christians to really weigh up the policies of all the parties, but Christians really need to understand and know that the Greens are out there to attack Christian faith and attack Christian freedoms. And this is very obvious in their policy platform. They want to abolish the National Schools Chaplaincy Program. They want a completely secular public education system. They don't want Christian schools. And within the secular public education system, it's got to be free from religious proselytizing and free from materials that discriminate on the basis of race, sexuality and gender. And we know that in Christian schools, this means schools simply upholding a Christian view on male and female and marriage. So they don't want that to exist. They are proposing cuts to faith-based community services and programs. And then in the things that they're obviously for pride parades and investing millions, in fact, $150 million to fund disability pride events. On their policy platform, which is unique to them, is they support abortion to birth with no restrictions. So we're talking about extreme policies. This is the most extreme, abortion to birth with no restrictions. I mean, the fact is we already have that across Australia, but this is actually within their policy platform. And then on the gender issues, removing all gender distinctions in law, which will then lead to changes in single-sex spaces and no ability for women's sport to remain female only. And I pulled this one off the website because I thought it was really interesting and just reveals how extreme they really are. One of their policies is a fully resourced, anti-colonial, anti-racist, anti-patriarchal and feminist structure to foreign affairs and policy. So go figure what that means. But Christians really need to be aware and also to tell their friends, to let their church community know that the Greens are not a social justice environment party. You know, some Christians might be led to vote for the Greens because they think that they're the more compassionate party or they're out there for social justice. But they're not. They are an anti-Christian party. And just this morning I heard Senator Sarah Hanson-Young on the radio defending the decision of the Creative Arts Australia for not allowing an artist who had previously shown support for a Hamas leader to be in an international competition. So she can defend, supporters of Hamas, but then throw Christian freedoms under the bus.
Yes. The extreme, and I guess, for listeners, if you didn't listen in carefully to that, you might be thinking that the Greens policies all sound very nice as you read a little one sentence of what they might be suggesting that they stand for. But dig a little deeper, and the anti-Christian, anti-Australianness of those policies really, really is very, very powerful. I mean, the whole anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian positions that the Greens do appear to have, those sorts of things could be challenging even in their own right. But you mentioned a whole lot of different dimensions there. And when you think of a power-sharing arrangement of the Labor Party and the Greens, the image that might come to mind is the Greens with a gun to the head of the Labor Party. Is that the way it probably would look if that were to be the case, that there was a power-sharing arrangement?
Well, certainly they would do all that they can to ensure that their policy agenda is advanced and benefited through this power-sharing arrangement. So we're going to the Labor Party with other faith leaders to request that they don't compromise religious freedoms if they do have a power-sharing arrangement in the next term. But we haven't received a response to those questions yet. We're really hoping just by putting the pressure on and standing for our freedom that we will gain those commitments, which means that the Greens can't manipulate Labor, but it is a very real danger.
Then, of course, you've got Labor Teals. That could be a power-sharing arrangement too, or Labor Greens Teals, all making up some level of Labor minority government. So in some sense here, that is what we may be looking at if the coalition doesn't win enough seats to actually govern in their own right. So it's a pretty challenging situation ahead, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's going to be very interesting to see what it looks like. That the Teals won't give away who they will support if it came to a power-sharing arrangement. Traditionally, it will be the party with the most seats. But in this sort of cultural war that we're in, and perhaps some of the issue that the coalition are looking to push might not be in alignment with some of the values of the Teals. So it will be, very telling to see who they side with if it comes to that power-sharing arrangement.
All right, lots more to talk about, and as we say, there's not even an election date that is announced yet, but I think you could certainly agree that the campaigning is on in full swing, even though there's no special date that has been announced. Hey, let's talk Victoria for a few moments, an inquiry into legalisation of cannabis in Victoria. What's happening there?
Yeah, so when I was reading through the aims of the inquiry, it says that the aims are to prevent cannabis use, but the bill that they're proposing is actually a bill to make it lawful for an adult to possess a small quantity of cannabis for their personal use, but then also to cultivate 6 cannabis plants for their use and then enable them to give cannabis away as a gift to another adult. So our ACL State Director, Jasmine Neward, went to the inquiry, and unfortunately she was the only one, ACL was the only one who were standing against the decriminalisation of, legalisation of cannabis. And the evidence that we cited, which is real scientific evidence that's out there, which shows that cannabis, even using it for medicinal purposes, leads to psychiatric disorders and anxiety and depression, schizophrenia and psychosis. In fact, I remember one of my friends in high school used marijuana once, and she was in counselling for years after that, overcoming the mental issue that she had when she only had it one time. But it's not only psychiatric issues; it's linked to birth defects and genetic mutations and cognitive issues, and then harm to bones and lungs and your respiratory system. And not only that, the numerous road deaths caused by drug-affected drivers, it's shown to contribute to about a quarter of road fatalities. So legalising cannabis isn't a good call, especially when they're saying it's to prevent the use of cannabis. Legalisation sends a message that it's okay to use cannabis, and it will only increase the drug use. So ACL is very concerned about what this will do to the state of Victoria, and there's a push all around Australia to legalise marijuana. Marijuana is a gateway drug to other drugs. So we definitely need more advocates to speak out against the legalisation of marijuana.
I mean, there's a lightweight argument that if you legalise it or decriminalise it, then you can tax it. But the US experience would show that the black market soars. And in fact, there's so many retail outlets in the US, and the retail outlets even going broke because the black market is so significant. So there's all sorts of things that can't work, whether you're talking about economics or, as you say, a gateway drug that leads to all of those social distortions, and that's got to be a bad thing. Hey, let's talk Northern Territory here for a few moments, because there was a change of government in the Territory last year, and the Northern Territory's new Chief Minister has made some comments on her first speech to the Parliament and reaffirming their commitment to religious freedom. What do you understand has been said?
Yes, that's right, and this is something that we are celebrating. It was during the first hour of Parliament in 2025. So the Honourable Leah Finocchiaro, who's the Chief Minister in the Northern Territory, she said that Labor wanted to tell She said that Labor wanted to tell Territorians what to say, when to say it, and how to say it. That they, as the CLP, know that their role is to create an environment where Territorians are in control of their lives. So they said that they'll amend the Anti-Discrimination Act to fix the mess that Labor made, so that religious schools can prioritise same-faith teachers, and that they'll remove the ridiculous inclusion of offending someone as some type of discrimination. So we're celebrating this because this is a move that we hope state and territory and the federal government will actually learn from, that there is a lot of damage to undo in changes that have been made to anti-discrimination acts around the country that limit religious freedom and also include, expansive sort of discrimination and hate speech definitions that include just simple offence to someone in which, it possibly wasn't even meant to offend. So she's seen the ridiculousness of this, and she's really restored common sense back into the Northern Territory Anti-Discrimination Act. So she gave us this commitment actually in 2022. So her stating this is just a confirmation of that commitment that she made all those years ago. And
perhaps a beginning of a working example of how you can, in fact, roll back some of these things that take away the freedom of Christian schools, the religious freedom aspects of what's going on right throughout Australia. Hey, in Tasmania, a Tasmanian parliamentary inquiry into bullying in schools targeting religious freedom. What's happening there?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, this inquiry is supposed to genuinely be about bullying in schools, but through all of the statements that politicians have made about it, in the terms of reference, it really is this ideologically driven, a politically driven agenda rather than just genuinely addressing bullying at schools. And this is made clear there was a report by the Australian Council for Education and Research that didn't actually include identity politics as a cause of bullying. The report showed that the kids that are bullied, or most of them, are male or come from a disadvantaged socioeconomic background, they're from regional areas, they're Indigenous, or they're Australian rather than foreign-born, which was interesting. But it didn't show that the LGBTQ plus issue was actually a cause for bullying in schools. And the report actually showed that Catholic schools are significantly less likely to report experiences of feeling bullied rather than those in government sector schools. But it seems that this inquiry was created as a backlash to Archbishop Porteous, Archbishop Julian Porteous, who's the Archbishop of Hobart, who continues to defend a Christian view of marriage and gender in Catholic schools. So he actually appeared before the inquiry this week to defend their ability to uphold their ethos in hiring. The executive of Catholic schools actually said outright that if a candidate for a senior leadership position was living outside of Catholic moral precepts, that they would not be able to employ them as a senior leader. So this was attacked by Equality Australia and Rodney Croom, who says that that's breaking the law in terms of Tasmanians' anti-discrimination laws. And Archbishop Porteous defended it by saying, well, they have protections in the Sex Discrimination Act, which we do. But he's seeking advice from the Tasmanian Anti-Discrimination Commission, who is actually very unfavourable to Christian values in any case, to make the case that Catholic schools are in breach of the Tasmanian Anti-Discrimination Act. So we knew that this tension would arise between state anti-discrimination and the protections that we have, faith groups have through the Sex Discrimination Act. But now this is case and example. So we'll watch this and see where it goes. It feels like at the moment we're hanging on to these exemptions by a thread. And so that's why it's another very important issue looming in the federal election, is that the exemptions to faith-based institutions are upheld within the next term of government.
Yes, important to monitor that along. Hey, Senator Pauline Hanson has made a bid for a ban on transgender treatments for children, alongside a call for a fresh investigation into the so-called gender-affirming care. What are your thoughts about her stance here?
It was fantastic to see her standing up, really in opposition to the federal government's inquiry. So the federal government, as we discussed a couple of weeks ago, they've commissioned the National Health and Medical Research Council to inquire into the safety of puberty blockers, but they're only going to report on their findings sometime next year. And meanwhile, kids are still being prescribed this dangerous medication that is likely to make them infertile. We know that many actually come to regret their decision. So we need an immediate ban on this, and that's what she was calling for, an immediate ban on these treatments, but also an independent inquiry that is not ideologically captured. And we're really concerned that the NHMRC inquiry review that the government has called for is influenced ideologically. It has ties to AusPath, which is the Australian Professional Association of Transgender Health. We know that they are heavily influenced by transgender activists, so it's a real cause for concern. So what was worth celebrating was that 18 coalition senators actually supported Senator Hanson's bid for a fresh inquiry. And so that's more than ever before. She has done these calls previously, but now more and more people are getting on board. So it's another thing we're going to continue to put pressure on at the federal election for an independent inquiry and for an immediate ban of these puberty blockers. Across the world, they're banning them. Why is Australia still allowing this medical experiment to continue?
You know, the election campaign is seemingly in full swing. There's no date set yet. My suspicion might be that some of the parties might be trying not to talk about all of these sorts of things around puberty blockers and gender-affirming care and such things. Is this one of those things that perhaps wherever you are, talking to MPs is going to be important to actually bring this to the fore because of an election campaign and see if there is a difference on either side?
Absolutely, and we'll be asking those questions in the lead up to the election. We'll be asking what's their definition of male and female? How do they view biology? Those simple questions that really reveal if someone is reasonable and has common sense, or whether they're ideologically captured by this belief that gender is just a social construct and not something that is defined by how we're born and our basic biology. So it's very revealing in how somebody answers that question. There is Dutton probably does want to avoid the culture wars. I think simply by those stating how education has been ideologically captured, well, he's in it now, he's entered it, but it's absolutely necessary that they do call these things out. So whether it's before the election or whoever wins government, our nation can't continue to ignore the damage that's being done to children through the use of puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones and surgeries that's changing them for life and damaging them for life. So it's unfortunately it's a political issue because politicians are the ones who have the power to ban this treatment.
And before I let you go, Michelle, the idea of raising up leaders for the future, of preparing people who are able to involve themselves in the rough and tumble of politics and social engagement. The Lachlan Macquarie Institute has got its autumn residential fellowship program starting towards the end of March, 23rd of March, I think the date is. What's your encouragement for listeners and particularly for young people listening who maybe appropriately qualified and able to put their best foot forward and prepare for some engagement for the future. What are your thoughts around the Lachlan Macquarie Institute?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to share about it, because it's just hearing about the issues that I'm discussing, I think people are moved and they think, well, how can I influence and what can I do to be a part of the change? We desperately need people of faith, people of strong Christian character with a good worldview to go into politics and influencing policy so that they can shape the future of our nation. And so the Lachlan Macquarie Institute has a 3-month live-in program. It's called a residential fellowship program. And they have teaching on theology and history and political philosophy, and really provides them with a framework in which to engage, thoughtfully with the ideas that influence the public sphere. So I just encourage listeners, if they know of anybody who has this heart and desire to go into political or policy engagement, and no matter how old they are, it's not only for young people, it can be anybody, to commit 3 months of their life to be formed in a way that then opens up many opportunities for engaging in the political sphere.
So Lachlan Macquarie Institute, lmi.org.au for listeners who want to find some more detail there. And as Michelle says, you might like to even pass on to someone you know has some level of gifting and capacity to be able to engage in these issues on a political level. You can connect with the Australian Christian Lobby at acl.org.au. No doubt there's a link there to the LMI website as well, but acl.org.au. Michelle Pearse is CEO at the Australian Christian Lobby. Michelle, thanks so much for a very informative update today on 2020.
Thanks, Neil. God bless.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.